The galaxy was dying. Once it had been a vast expanse of thriving civilizations, each world connected by trade, knowledge, and the promise of a better future. The stars had shone brightly with the light of thousands of flourishing species. But now that light was fading. The once vibrant planets lay in ruins, their cities turned to rubble, their people scattered, hiding in fear. The invaders, ruthless and relentless, had swept through the galaxy like a plague, taking everything in their path. The invaders were an alien race, far stronger and more advanced than any of the galaxy's civilizations. They came without warning, their ships darkening the skies of every world they conquered. For years they crushed any resistance, obliterating the greatest fleets and taking entire planets without a second thought. At first, the galaxy had fought back, rallying its armies, uniting its forces. But one by one, the great empires fell. The survivors were few, their numbers shrinking with each passing day. The galaxy, once a shining beacon of life, now stood on the edge of destruction. Across the galaxy, the cries for help had become a constant hum in the vastness of space. Each planet, each civilization, sent its final, desperate plea for aid. But no one came. The great empires, the powerful fleets, and the mighty armies of the past had all been destroyed. The survivors were alone, adrift in the cold void of space, their hopes fading with each battle they lost. In the final days, when it seemed like nothing could save them, the last leaders of the galaxy gathered in a secret council, hidden away on a distant, forgotten world. They were the final remnants of the once great races, and they knew their time was running out. The invaders were closing in, their fleets arriving in waves, their weapons devastating any resistance. The galaxy's leaders had tried everything. They had sent out message after message, hoping for a miracle, hoping that someone, anyone, would hear their cries. But there was no answer. The rest of the universe seemed to have turned its back on them. The galaxy had become a forgotten corner of the cosmos, its cries falling on deaf ears. Then, in the darkest hour, when it seemed like hope had completely vanished, the leaders made a decision. They had no choice left but to send one final message, a message that carried with it the last of their hope. It would be sent to the stars, to any race that still had the strength to answer. "We are dying," the message began. "The galaxy is falling. The invaders are upon us, and we have nothing left to fight with. Our fleets are broken, our cities are gone, and our people are scattered. We cannot survive alone. Please, we beg for help. If anyone is out there, if anyone can hear us, we need you now. We are the last of our kind. Help us before it is too late." The message was sent in every possible way, every possible channel. It was broadcast across every frequency, reaching out into the depths of space, where only silence had answered before. The leaders of the galaxy watched as the message left their planet, sent out to the void, hoping that somehow it would reach someone, anyone, who could help. But the silence that followed was deafening. The message seemed to vanish into nothingness. Days passed, weeks. The survivors waited, holding their breath, waiting for a response, but none came. The galaxy's final cry for help had been sent into the darkness, unanswered. Desperation began to set in. The invaders were closing in. There was no escape. The end was inevitable. The leaders of the galaxy sat in their council chamber, silent and defeated. They had done all they could. They had fought, they had pleaded, and now there was nothing left. They had hoped that someone would hear their cry, but no one had come. The universe had turned away from them. Yet amid the despair, one of the leaders, an old general who had fought in countless wars, stood up. His face was weary, but his eyes were filled with a spark of defiance. "We can't give up," he said, his voice steady. "We still have one chance. The message was sent, and it hasn't been answered yet. Maybe we didn't reach the right place. Maybe the message didn't go far enough. But we can't stop. We have to keep fighting, even if it's the last thing we do." His words sparked something in the others. They had been beaten, yes. They had lost everything. But this was not the time to give up. If they wanted to survive, they had to keep going, keep fighting. They had one final chance, one last message to send, but this time it wouldn't just be a cry for help. It would be a call to arms. "We send it again," the general said. "We send it louder, clearer. We send it to anyone who is still out there, anyone who can hear us. The galaxy isn't lost yet, not while we still have breath." The decision was made. The last cry for help would be sent again, but this time, it would not just be a plea for mercy. It would be a warning. The galaxy had fought before, and it would fight again. Humanity had not given up, and neither would the other races of the galaxy. The war was not over. It was just beginning. And this time, there would be an answer. The message had been sent. It had crossed the vastness of space, echoing across the stars like a desperate prayer. But in the quiet aftermath, nothing came. The silence that followed was suffocating, as if the entire galaxy had abandoned them, leaving them to die alone. The survivors, scattered across dying planets and forgotten colonies, held their breath in a futile hope that something would break the stillness. The leaders waited, watching the communication channels, waiting for a sign, anything that would bring them back to life. But all they received was silence. The universe had turned its back on them. It was a silent agreement, unspoken, but clear. The galaxy was dead. Days turned into weeks. The survivors on the planets had begun to make preparations for what seemed like the inevitable. Shelters were fortified, supplies dwindled, and the once bright hope of survival had dimmed to a faint flicker. Even the most optimistic had lost faith. What was the point of hoping when there was no one left to save them? The invaders would soon sweep through the last remnants of resistance, and the galaxy would fall into darkness. In the darkest corners of the galaxy, some had already begun to give in. The leaders convened again, but this time the conversation was different. It wasn't about survival anymore, it was about what to do when the end finally came. "Maybe it's time to accept what's coming," one of the leaders said quietly, his voice heavy with grief. "There's no help coming. The message has been heard and still nothing. No one cares. The invaders will be here soon and we'll be wiped out. We should face it with dignity." Others in the room nodded in agreement, their faces tired and worn. The weight of years of war had taken its toll. Every planet had fought, every species had bled, but in the end, it was always the same: defeat. The enemy was too strong, too many, and the galaxy was too fractured to fight back. There was no unifying force, no one to rally the galaxy together. It was over. Yet in the silence of the room, something shifted. Something faint but undeniable. A hum, like a distant echo, began to grow. At first, no one noticed. It was too subtle, too soft, like the faintest tremor in the air. But then, it grew louder and it was unmistakable. The sound was the hum of technology, the thrum of a ship, massive and powerful, the hum of an answer, a response. The leaders scrambled to their stations, their eyes widening in disbelief as the signals on their screens shifted. The empty silence of space was breaking. A signal was coming through. But this wasn't the usual static or random interference they had come to expect. It was organized. It was structured. And it was clear. "Humanity is coming," the message crackled, its tone strong and certain. "Prepare yourselves." The message wasn't just a signal, it was a promise. The leaders couldn't believe it at first. Was it real? Was it a mistake? The faint hope they had pushed away, the idea that someone might still answer, suddenly seemed possible. But the reality was still so far from what they expected. Humanity had been thought destroyed. The Earth's fleets, once formidable and then silent, were believed to be gone, lost forever in the early days of the war. And yet, this message told them otherwise. Humanity? The words fell from one leader's lips in disbelief. They've been gone for years. How can they be? But the message continued, cutting through the confusion. We will fight. The galaxy will not fall. Humanity will rise again. The transmission continued to pulse, echoing across the galaxy, a signal carried on waves of raw power. Humanity had returned. The survivors had thought they were forgotten, doomed to perish in the shadows of the invaders' campaign. But this new message sparked something inside them, an ember of hope. "Help is here," the message concluded. "We will not be silenced." Across the galaxy, those who still had the strength to listen felt a stir of hope unlike anything they had felt in years. The feeling was strange, something unfamiliar in the years of death and devastation. It was hope, fragile and delicate, but powerful enough to stir the heart. The question that followed, however, was one that no one had an answer to. How? The galaxy was broken. The invaders had already taken so much. Could humanity, a species thought to be wiped out, really rise from the ashes and lead the galaxy back from the brink? The survivors had no fleet, no means to fight, only whispers of a lost power. Could one planet truly save the galaxy? And yet, the message lingered in their minds. Humanity was coming. As the survivors prepared for whatever was to come, their hearts were filled with uncertainty. They had seen civilizations fall, fleets crumble, and the galaxy burn. Could humanity's return really change the course of this war? But one thing was clear. For the first time in years, they were no longer alone. The echo of the distress call had been answered. And now, the fate of the galaxy rested in the hands of a species that had been thought lost. The galaxy had barely begun to process the news of humanity's unexpected return when the first signs of their presence became undeniable. The survivors of the galaxy's once proud civilizations watched as their monitors flickered to life with a strange frequency, a signal growing steadily louder, more defined. At first it was just a shadow, a blip on the radar, but soon it was unmistakable. Humanity's war fleet was arriving. The galaxy was about to feel the weight of their power. For decades, humanity had been believed to be extinct, its fleet destroyed. In the early years of the invasion, the invaders had ruthlessly wiped out Earth's last defenses, leaving only stories of Earth's once great fleets to whisper through the galaxy's history. The survivors who remembered Earth's might now looked in disbelief at the ships that began to emerge from the dark abyss of space. At first, the invaders dismissed the signal. It seemed impossible. Humanity's war fleet, the one they had heard of only in legend, could not have survived. They had wiped it out. The survivors knew the story well. Earth had been forgotten. Humanity had been buried beneath the rubble of the galaxy's defeat. But the signal was real, and it was growing louder, stronger, more impossible to ignore. The edge of the galaxy, humanity's fleet made its presence known. Their warships, massive and bristling with weapons, cut through the darkness of space like a storm. They arrived not with diplomacy or soft words, but with a force that rippled across the stars, announcing that humanity had returned, not just as survivors, but as warriors. Captain Isabella Coleman, commander of humanity's war fleet, stood on the bridge of the flagship Vanguard. Her eyes were fixed on the galaxy map, watching as humanity's warships spread across the vastness of space. The signal they had sent out had been a call to arms, a declaration of humanity's intent. But the journey to this moment had not been easy. It had been years of struggle, years of waiting, and years of preparation for this very moment. The fleet had been constructed in secret, hidden from the invaders' prying eyes, waiting for the right moment to strike. Every ship was armed with advanced technology, designed to push back the enemy and reclaim the galaxy. The Vanguard was the largest and most powerful ship in humanity's fleet, its weapon systems capable of decimating entire fleets with a single strike. Captain Coleman had seen the devastation that had been wrought upon the galaxy, and she had seen the desperation of those who had reached out for help. The invaders had torn through the galaxy with impunity, and humanity's initial defeat had been crushing. But humanity had always had one thing the invaders never counted on: resilience. And now they were ready to show the galaxy just what humanity could do when pushed to the edge. "Activate weapon systems," Captain Coleman ordered, her voice calm but filled with purpose. "Prepare for first contact. We are not here to ask for mercy. We are here to deliver it." The Vanguard powered up its massive engines and the fleet followed suit. The ships moved in perfect formation, their immense size dwarfing any fleet the invaders had ever seen. The survivors of the galaxy watched in awe as humanity's war fleet glided through space, their hearts filled with a mixture of hope and fear. Could humanity truly change the tide of this war? The invaders, who had once thought the galaxy was theirs to dominate, were now scrambling to regroup. Their leaders had dismissed humanity as an insignificant threat, but now they realized the galaxy's last hope had arrived. The battle that was about to unfold would determine the fate of the galaxy. Humanity's fleet was not here to negotiate or plead. They were here to reclaim their place in the stars. As the first wave of humanity's ships entered the heart of the invaders' territories, the tension in the galaxy grew palpable. The invader fleet, once thought to be invincible, was suddenly being challenged by a force they had not prepared for. The first salvo of weapons fire erupted from humanity's warships, and the enemy fleet recoiled in shock. The battle was swift and brutal. Humanity's ships tore through the invader lines with unrelenting precision. The invaders had relied on their overwhelming numbers, but humanity had learned from their past mistakes. The fleet was smaller but stronger, each ship carrying a weapon, capable of turning the tide in a single shot. The Vanguard fired its main cannon, sending a bolt of energy so powerful that it obliterated an entire enemy cruiser. The invaders' formations began to break as humanity's warships continued their relentless assault. The sky above the battlefields was filled with the sound of explosions, the flashes of laser fire, and the deafening roar of combat. But this time, it wasn't humanity that was on the defensive. It was the invaders who were on the retreat. The bridge of the Vanguard. Captain Coleman watched as their ships tore through the enemy fleet. Her eyes were focused, calculating. They had come for the galaxy's freedom, and they would not stop until it was theirs again. The message had been clear from the beginning. Humanity was no longer weak. They were a force to be reckoned with, and they would fight until the very last enemy was driven from the stars. "We've made our mark," Captain Coleman said, her voice steady as she watched the invader fleet crumble before their might. "But we're just getting started. The galaxy isn't free yet." The battle was far from over, but humanity had shown the invaders the true meaning of defiance. The survivors of the galaxy watched as the war fleet continued to advance, a beacon of hope in the darkness. Humanity had returned not to beg for help but to offer it, and they would not stop until the galaxy was free. The invaders, reeling from the first onslaught of humanity's war fleet, quickly regrouped, but the damage had already been done. They had underestimated humanity's power, and now they faced an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. The invaders had built their empire on the backs of countless conquered worlds, confident in their superiority. But humanity's return shattered that confidence in an instant. The vastness of the galaxy now trembled under the weight of humanity's warships. The Vanguard led the charge, its immense size cutting through the darkness of space like a blade. Its cannons, glowing with blue energy, fired relentlessly, tearing apart enemy ships in a deadly ballet of destruction. The invaders, struggling to maintain control, scattered, trying desperately to regroup. But they were no match for humanity's sheer fury. On board the Vanguard, Captain Isabella Coleman stood tall, her eyes focused on the battlefield. Her face was calm, but inside, her heart pounded with the weight of the responsibility that had been thrust upon her. Humanity had not just entered this war to survive, they had entered to win. The message had been sent across the stars. Humanity would no longer be ignored. They would not back down. They would never surrender. "We strike now while they're still disoriented," Captain Coleman ordered. "Target their supply ships and their command centers. We cripple their ability to respond." Her crew, fully trained and battle-hardened, moved swiftly. The Vanguard and the rest of humanity's fleet dove deeper into enemy territory, each ship firing with deadly accuracy, hitting critical points on the invaders' ships. It wasn't just about defeating them. It was about sending a message that humanity was here to stay. The invaders' forces, disorganized and rattled by the unexpected assault, tried to retaliate. But for every strike they launched, humanity responded with overwhelming force. The human fleet had become a machine of war, each ship acting as one, their systems perfectly synchronized. The invaders' attempts to regroup were crushed under the weight of humanity's relentless attacks. Each victory for humanity was not just a strategic win, it was a sign of their unbreakable will. But even as the invaders began to falter, they refused to give up. Their pride, their arrogance burned bright. They would not allow a species they had once thought insignificant to defeat them. A counterattack was organized, the remaining invader ships forming a final line of defense. It was their last stand. The decision was made. They would either destroy humanity or perish trying. The Vanguard and its fleet charged forward once more, its weapons firing with a fury that matched the storm of energy around them. The invaders unleashed everything they had, their ships firing in waves, trying to break through humanity's defenses. It was the fiercest battle yet, a war of attrition, with neither side willing to relent. On the bridge of the Vanguard, Captain Coleman's grip tightened around the command console. The battle was reaching its peak. Every ship in the fleet had taken damage, and many of the warships were showing signs of wear. The invaders had pushed humanity to their limits, but they hadn't broken them. Humanity was still standing, still fighting. "This is it," Captain Coleman said, her voice steady. "We don't stop. Push forward. No retreat. For Earth. For the galaxy." The Vanguard led the charge, cutting through the last remnants of the invader fleet with laser-like precision. As the flagship of humanity's war fleet fired its final salvo, a massive explosion lit up the dark expanse of space. The invader fleet's final line of defense shattered, and their command ships, once the symbols of their strength, were reduced to flaming wreckage. For the first time in years, the galaxy was silent. The invaders had been defeated. The war was over. Humanity had won. In the wake of the final thunderous explosion, the galaxy stood still. The echoes of the battle faded, leaving only the distant hum of humanity's war fleet as it slowly advanced through the vast expanse of space. The invaders, once so sure of their victory, were no more. Their remnants drifted in the cosmic void, a testament to humanity's strength and resolve. For the survivors scattered across the galaxy, there was no longer the crushing weight of defeat. There was no longer the constant fear that tomorrow might be their last day. The war was over. The invaders had been defeated. The galaxy, broken and shattered, now had a chance to rebuild. And at the center of it all stood humanity, a species that had been thought lost, now the beacon of hope for the galaxy. Captain Isabella Coleman stood at the bridge of the Vanguard, staring out at the wreckage of the enemy fleet, her heart still pounding from the intensity of the battle. The victory was theirs, but there was little time to celebrate. The galaxy was still in ruins, and while the invaders had been defeated, the scars of war ran deep. Humanity's fight wasn't just against invaders, it was against the very darkness that threatened to consume everything they had fought to protect. "We did it, Captain," Lieutenant Maya Richards said softly, her voice filled with awe. "We've freed the galaxy." Coleman turned to her, a faint smile crossing her face. "Yes, but our work isn't finished. The galaxy may be free of the invaders, but it's still fractured. There's much to rebuild." As the Vanguard and humanity's fleet moved toward the shattered remnants of various galactic empires, the survivors began to realize what humanity had given them. The message was clear. Humanity wasn't just here to defeat the invaders. They were here to heal the galaxy. They were here to show the galaxy that unity, strength, and resilience were more than just words. They were the foundation of a new era, but humanity's victory would not come without its challenges. The galaxy was a vast place, filled with histories of mistrust and bitter conflict. The war had torn apart civilizations, leaving countless worlds in need of aid, reconstruction, and guidance. And as the last remaining ships of the invader fleet drifted into the abyss, Captain Coleman knew that the real work was only just beginning. The first diplomatic envoy was sent to meet with the leaders of the galaxy's remaining civilizations. Humanity had proven its strength in battle, but it would now have to prove its strength in leadership. Captain Coleman, the symbol of humanity's victory, would stand at the forefront of this new chapter in galactic history. The leaders of the galaxy, once hesitant and fractured, now saw humanity as their salvation, their leaders. "We'll need to rebuild from the ground up," Captain Coleman said, as she addressed her officers. "The galaxy is broken, but it can be rebuilt. We'll help those who are willing to fight alongside us, but we must be strong, united, and unyielding." Her words rang through the ranks. The soldiers, the diplomats, the engineers, they all understood. They had not only fought for their own survival, they had fought for the survival of the entire galaxy. And now, they would build a future, one where peace and prosperity were possible once again. Humanity's fleet moved to the forefront of the rebuilding effort. Warships turned into aid ships, their weapons now dormant, their cargo holds filled with supplies for rebuilding the devastated worlds. The survivors who had once cowered in the shadow of the invaders now stood tall, knowing that humanity's return had changed everything, and slowly the first signs of peace began to take root. Captain Coleman stood with her crew on the observation deck, looking out at a galaxy slowly waking from its nightmare. The stars, once cold and distant, now seemed to shine with a new light. It wasn't just the fire of battle that had ignited the galaxy. It was the fire of hope. Humanity had become the spark that lit the way for everyone else. As the Vanguard sailed toward a distant star system, now a hub for the galaxy's rebuilding efforts, Captain Coleman felt a deep sense of pride. They had defeated the invaders, but they had done so much more. They had restored the galaxy's hope, its unity, and its will to survive. "We did more than win a war," Captain Coleman said, her voice filled with determination. "We gave the galaxy a future." The people of the galaxy began to rebuild, to forge alliances, and to dream of a future where they could live in peace. And at the center of it all stood humanity, not as conquerors but as leaders, showing the galaxy what it truly meant to rise from the ashes. The invaders were gone, and humanity had proven that even in the darkest of times, there was always hope. The galaxy, reborn from the ruins of war, would now flourish under the guidance of those who had fought hardest to protect it. And as the stars began to shine once more, humanity knew that this was just the beginning of a new era.